Welcome to my Rotary Show, doing good and having fun. Now, as some of you may have already heard, last Monday was World Polio Day, where we celebrated worldwide the eradication of polio and the fight that Rotary, the CDC, and the World Health Organization, along with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, have actually taken up to make sure that polio is eradicated from the face of the earth. I thought it only appropriate that today you actually take a look at that live broadcast many of us didn't see, and it's well worth watching. So we've broken that up into 3 segments to cover this hour that we're actually on the air. So the first segment is actually going to talk about the progress of Rotary and the fight against polio and how important eradicating polio is not only to the United States, but the entire world. Let's go ahead and take a look at the recorded live feed.
Rotary and UNICEF, we were there from the beginning of the fight, ending polio country by country. Vaccinating every child. Together, we will make history. Together, we will end polio. Join the fight today. UNICEFUSA.org/Rotary.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program will begin shortly. Please silence your phones, but we hope you'll participate in the social media discussion using the hashtag #EndPolio, and we encourage you to clap during the live segments. Welcome to Rotary and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control's World Polio Day event live from Atlanta. Featuring U.S. Paralympian Dennis Ogbe, Editor-at-Large at Time Magazine, Jeffrey Kluger, co-founder of What's Trending, Shira Lazar, and Today Show news correspondent, Jenna Bush Hager. Now, please welcome the Director of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, Dr. Tom Frieden.
Welcome to World Polio Day, live from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Tom Frieden, Director of CDC, and I'm delighted to host this special event with Rotary International, one of our core partners in the effort to eradicate polio forever. Many people ask me, why do you care about polio? There are no cases in the US. There are many other urgent health challenges. But every morning, I know when I wake up that there's more that we can do, that we can make people healthier and happier across the globe, and I'm personally committed to ending this completely preventable disease. I also want to answer a simple question. What does it take to end polio? You'll hear the story of how far we've come, what still needs to be done, and lessons to be learned. Dr. Salk, creator of the first effective polio vaccine, once said, "I've had dreams and I've had nightmares, but I've conquered my nightmares because of my dreams." Tonight you'll hear from many other heroes besides Dr. Salk, who you will hear from obviously, but his words are with us. You'll hear from heroes of the polio eradication effort, including survivors, health workers, volunteers, and scientists who have conquered nightmares with dreams. I particularly want to recognize the individuals on the front lines of the battle against polio, the vaccinators, the community mobilizers, people who are working in more than 100 countries around the world, sometimes in very difficult and dangerous circumstances, and sometimes at considerable personal risk. It is to them that we owe an enormous debt of gratitude. Another man who's conquered nightmares with dreams is a special guest and a world-class athlete, Dennis Ogbe.
In hindsight, life seems linear. It's a story you get really good at telling. But in moments of uncertainty, when I have no idea what direction to take, I tell myself to do even more. Polio changed the way I walk, but not what I can be. I'm a father, a professional, an activist, a national champion, and a polio survivor. My father told me it's not where you start that matters, it's how you finish. After paralysis, I worked to regain the strength to walk. I never gave in to polio, and neither can you. Every day we're one step closer to eradication. Let's finish, and finish strong.
Good evening. I'm Jeffrey Kluger, editor-at-large for Time magazine. I've written about polio for many years, so it's my personal pleasure to be able to talk to the director of one of the world's largest and most advanced disease-fighting centers, Dr. Tom Friedman. Dr. Frieden, forgive me, I really do know this gentleman's name. Dr. Frieden, you mentioned earlier that there's been no case of polio in the U.S. since 1979. So why is the Centers for Disease Control, a U.S. agency, focusing so much energy and money on the polio problem?
We're in it to win it, and we're in it until the end, along with polio and the other partners. It's important for the world, and it's important for every country and every child, because as long as there's polio spreading anywhere in the world, every child is potentially at risk. In addition, we have investments in strengthening systems around the world, and those investments are going to pay off. They're going to pay off in fewer measles cases, fewer rubella cases, health systems around the world that can find and stop outbreaks when they first occur. Our mission is to protect Americans from health threats. There's no way we can do that only working within our own borders.
Now, in 1988, when Rotary began its campaign to eradicate polio worldwide, there were 125 countries in which polio was endemic. Where are the last bastions of the disease now?
As far as we know, there are just 3 countries left: Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. These are the last areas, and they have the common feature of insecurity. Places where we have not been able to reach children to vaccinate them or to monitor and do surveillance to identify new cases. This presents enormous challenges, but also shows that it's possible, even in areas as diverse as Syria during the war there. We were able to, we believe, stop the spread of polio. It also shows the challenge of working in complex conflict situations. It's not going to be easy. It hasn't been as quick as we would have liked, but we're closer than we've ever been.
Now, as folks here might know, Nigeria is an interesting case because the polio eradication fight there is connected to other challenges we often see in the news, like the struggle against militant insurgencies. The second case in the recent polio outbreak was a 12-month-old boy was struck by polio not far from where Boko Haram abducted more than 200 schoolgirls in 2014. So what does this tell us about the intractability of this problem? It feels like we can't get past the bad guys to get to the kids.
This is a major challenge, and in retrospect, we should have recognized that surveillance or monitoring was not as strong as it should have been in the northeastern part of Nigeria, in Borno State, and not just there, but in the neighboring countries as well. If we don't know what's there, we may have some unpleasant surprises. That's why WHO, UNICEF, Gates Foundation, Rotary, and ourselves are doing a response, are leading a response, supporting countries in the response, not just in Borno, but in 5 countries in that area. And it also has a message about tracking systems around the world. There are many parts of the world that are just still cut off. We saw this in the Ebola outbreak, where there were entire communities in West Africa that had not only no cell phone or internet coverage or telephone coverage, but no radio coverage. no roads. They're truly cut off from the rest of the world. And with that lack of connectedness is the possibility that there could be other areas like northeastern Nigeria where polio has been spreading unrecognized. And we have to be able to find them and protect the children everywhere.
And we hear in this context the word surveillance used regularly. Now, that has one meaning outside the global health industry and one meaning within. What does surveillance mean for polio eradication?
Sometimes we use the term monitoring or tracking or disease monitoring, but surveillance really is the core of public health. If you're running a business, you look at your profit line, you look at your expenditures and your balance. In public health, if we didn't have ways of tracking information in real time, we wouldn't be able to make progress. The way smallpox was eradicated and the way polio will be eradicated is a very powerful surveillance system that allows us to know where polio is spreading, because only a small fraction of the children who are infected become paralyzed. It's important to find every child who has weakness, and wherever there's a sewer system, to look for polio there as well, because it can hide there for a few months. And then to adapt our response to those situations when we find cases. Surveillance also refers to tracking how well we're doing vaccinating children. Not enough to say we gave out 100,000 vaccines and there are 100,000 kids. We need to know how many of those vaccines actually reach the kids. So surveillance is all about data. And data sounds wonky, but actually it's about saving lives, because that data allows us to adjust the response and give the services where they're needed, when they're needed, in the way that is essential to get over the finish line.
Now, this morning at a press conference, you observed quite rightly that often the good news crowds out the bad news, or vice versa. The bad news crowds out the good news. And the bad news this year obviously has been Nigeria. And that has crowded out the good news in Pakistan and Afghanistan. So tell us a little bit about the progress that's being made there.
We've seen substantial progress. In Pakistan, there are now highly functional teams, a good surveillance system, a good dashboard, emergency operations centers. We've seen vaccination rates increase. UNICEF has done a great job getting community vaccinators into Karachi and throughout the country where there are areas where it may be difficult for outsiders or campaigners to occur. So there's continuous year-round vaccination. We've seen less than half the number of cases as last year by this time, and we've seen fewer clades or fewer types of virus. So as Riza said this afternoon, the virus is cornered, and we just need to not let it out again.
And I know there's some innovative techniques that haven't been used before to corner it further and finally snuff it out. Can you tell me some of those newer and more innovative techniques?
It's very interesting. When we look back on smallpox eradication, we assume they knew what they did, they knew what to do, they did it, and it got done. But in fact, that's not what happened. They were continuously innovating how to vaccinate, who to vaccinate, with what needle to use, how to monitor the program. The same is going on with the polio eradication program. Whether it's the use of an emergency operations center, as was done in Nigeria and now being used in the other countries, or the use of community vaccinators, or the use of IPV, the injectable inactivated polio vaccine, in addition to boost the immunity in the oral polio vaccine, or ways of using smartphones to track where vaccinations are being given. All of these are examples of innovations that fundamentally strengthen accountability. They strengthen our accountability to the world's children, to reach every last child.
Now, that all sounds very encouraging, but the fact is, eradication of any disease is essentially a binary phenomenon. There are either 0 cases or there's 1 case, and if there's 1 case, that's as good as 1,000,000 cases. So with this setback in Nigeria, even just 4 cases, it gets a lot of people wondering, is this ever possible to do? Can we really reach 0?
I will share with you that when I became CDC director in 2009, I had doubts. I didn't think India would get over the finish line, but it did. With Nigeria, we have a setback. The setback is in an area that we didn't have access to. That's a lesson. We know how to get to 0. We've gotten to 0 in more than 120 countries. We can get to 0 in Borno if we can reach the children there. But it also tells us that we have to look everywhere, especially where there isn't good connectivity, especially where, like Borno, we haven't been able to have access. That means looking carefully in parts of the world where there's conflict or isolated populations. And that'll be important to be able to really be sure we're at zero. But we know how to do it. We've done it almost everywhere. But as Reza said, almost isn't good enough.
Right. Now, let's assume we get down to zero, and we will. What about the small samples of polio that must remain in laboratories because you can't eradicate, you can't destroy all the polio virus, then you don't have anything with which to experiment later should a case come back up. So how do you ensure that you can keep these viruses safe in the supermax lockdown of the laboratory?
This is what's called containment. We do this for smallpox, where CDC maintains stocks of smallpox, as does Russia. These are internationally investigated, inspected, and kept safe. We also do very careful oversight of other dangerous pathogens in the US, like anthrax and botulism. These are very dangerous organisms. Polio is even more complex because if you've done a study of diarrheal disease, for example, in a country before it eliminated polio, you may have polio in those samples without even knowing it. So it's a big job to go to every laboratory that could possibly have polio and cone those down, get rid of the samples that we don't need, identify the few labs that may need to continue to work on vaccine or other issues, and then to make sure that they are completely ironclad safe. And that's going to take several years and a lot of effort.
Now, when we do get down to zero, the total price tag for polio eradication will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 billion. Is that money now just spent and gone, or are there ways that it can continue to be put to work in downstream assets?
Well, clearly that can continue to protect children, but what we do over the next few years is going to determine how much of that money is sunk costs and how much of it is an investment that will continue to protect children and improve health around the world. In areas like immunization policy, routine immunization, laboratory strengthening, emergency operation centers, protection of children, social mobilization, involvement in all sectors in health and public health, these are wonderful developments, and they can result in hundreds of thousands or millions of lives being saved from measles, many infants being protected from rubella, and not just vaccine preventable diseases, but whether it's malaria or, as we saw in Lagos, Nigeria, it was the polio team that stopped Ebola. What we've tried to do in the US with a coalition of more than 70 countries is to establish a global health security agenda. This is a way of wrapping together all of the essential public health functions so that we can help countries be stronger for their own sake, so that they can find and stop threats faster and prevent them wherever possible, and for the world's sake, so that no country has to fight a disease that got out of control in another country.
Well, thank you, Dr. Frieden. I actually feel more confident than I did 10 minutes ago, so that's a good thing. Now I'd like to welcome Rotary's Vice President from Ontario, Canada, Jennifer Jones.
Thank you, Jeff. Rotary and all of our partners in the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, the CDC, the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have been at the forefront of the world's battle against polio for the last 3 decades. And last night in Cleveland, we celebrated the centennial of the Rotary Foundation, which has changed millions of lives, with a special concert by the world-class Cleveland Symphony Orchestra. We raised over $2.1 million for polio eradication. To date, Rotary members have contributed over $1.6 billion to the effort. As well as fundraising, our 1.2 million Rotary members around the globe have pushed governments to commit funds and make good on their promises.
Enjoy tranquil seclusion in an eco-lover's paradise. Paddling through the mangroves where the only sounds you'll hear are the sounds of nature. Because you deserve to relax on vacation, visit Pasco County, Florida.
Young professionals and young people can find something in Rotary that makes so much sense for their existence.
One of my goals, and I think one of the goals of just younger people in general as we get into organizations like this, is to kind of diversify it.
There are a lot of people who have a lot to offer, but don't know an outlet for it, don't know where to put it, and this gives you access to everything.
I was just amazed at everything Rotary did and how much bigger than it was than what I thought it was, and so I wanted to join. I wanted to be a part of that.
You know, we laugh. It's a bunch of old guys that get together for lunch every week, and it's the furthest thing from that.
It's so much more than I originally thought it was. It wasn't just about making friends. It was about going out on a random Friday morning and helping to build a barn.
You know, we tend to be a little compartmentalized in our lives, and sometimes we forget people in our community who need help.
The face-to-face, the personal engagement with individuals and in the community you can't find that or replicate that elsewhere.
Whether we come from one walk of life or another, it transcends all of that because we come together in the name of service.
As a young professional, I just think it's one of the best things I could possibly have done.
Welcome back to my Rotary Show, doing good and having fun. We're going to take a look at another segment of the live broadcast from the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia on World Polio Day. Let's roll that footage.
Their promises. So tonight, and this gives me great pride, I'd like to thank the Government of Canada on behalf of Rotary International for stepping up with their contribution of $10 million towards its $250 million Global Vaccine Summit pledge. This contribution, which comes ahead of schedule, will help us to detect the virus, interrupt its transmission, and strengthen immunization systems worldwide. The Polio Eradication Initiative appreciates Canada's leadership and looks forward to continued cooperation to finish the job. Rotary members have also mobilized to support World Polio Day, and over 3,000 events are happening around the world. Whether you're watching from Africa or Asia, the Americas or Europe, thank you for tuning in. Now, let's get an update on what's happening on this truly International World Polio Day.
Hey everyone, I'm Shira Lazar, CEO, co-founder, and host of What's Trending. I'm so excited to be here, and I want to give a big thanks to you at home for tuning in from more than 40 countries from around the world. Let me start off by saying that I'm obsessed with all things digital. I'm always on my phone, and I love to see when people come together for a cause in the digital world to make a huge impact in the real one. And now let's take a look at what's happening around the world of social media this World Polio Day. We're following the hashtag #EndPolio to see what people are saying about World Polio Day. And you can show your support by tweeting and sharing messages with the hashtag or by including our handle @EndPolioNow, and we may feature you on the program. We have a lot to be proud of this year, and we're happy to see that so many people agree. Our successes in 2016 have been shared widely across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and the rest of the social media world. One of the partners in the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, illuminated their headquarters in Seattle, Washington, with the End Polio Now logo. Beautiful. And did you know that the Gates Foundation supports Rotary's fundraising efforts by tripling any donations made to Rotary for polio eradication efforts through a 2-to-1 match? Thank you so much for that. And you can donate now at endpolio.org. Another massive illumination is taking place in Pakistan. The Polio Plus team in Pakistan is illuminating the Kot DG Fort in the Kirpur district in celebration of World Polio Day. And they have a lot to celebrate after cutting the numbers of cases in the country by more than half compared to this time last year. It's awesome to see so many celebrities get involved for this cause too. Check out these messages that Rotary This Close ambassadors, UNICEF ambassadors, and other celebrities shared. Over 3,000 World Polio Day events are happening around the world, which is amazing to see. Rotary clubs are working to raise awareness in their local communities through various events and fundraising activities. Check out this massive effort in India. Rotary clubs in India created a flag made up of hundreds of people to show the world that they're proud to have gone more than 5 years without a case of polio. Congratulations. And let's hope it's a record breaker. The last time they tried this, Rotary members in Chennai created the world's largest human national flag, officially recognized by Guinness World Records, with almost 44,000 people. Now let's take a look at some of the events around the world that people have been sharing on social media. We know that people are celebrating World Polio Day in fun and unique ways, and we still want to hear about your events right now. Let us know what you did by going to endpolio.org and registering your event. Now let's go to Pakistan for an in-depth look at the amazing work taking place to eradicate polio forever.
Beforehand, the program was concentrating a lot on the percentage or number of children that we're able to cover every time in each campaign. But we shifted to focus on the number that we're consistently missing every campaign. These are the people on the move. These are people which are generally under-immunized, that are not caught generally on either side during the routine campaigns that are held. So in that sense, yes, these PTPs are very, very significant, and they're very critical in helping us catch and vaccinate populations that are constantly on the move.
We need to know the dynamics associated with the population movement from our international borders as well as from within the country, particularly in the challenges of accessing the more than 500,000 vulnerable people in FATA as well as in mega cities like Karachi and Peshawar. We have been able to contain the virus to 3 coal reservoir areas. We are primarily focusing on our international boundary. The most important is our border with Afghanistan, which is almost 2,500 kilometers long.
People movement from affected area or under-immunized area plays an important role in spreading the polio virus from a place to another. We have the nomadic movement, we have the economic migrant, we have the religious movement. Transit teams are necessary where there is a constant flow of persons traveling from areas where vaccination is limited. We need those vaccinated to be on the ground within those routes to be able to stop, to grab the kids and vaccinate them. Bus station, toll plaza, markets, amusement parks, health facilities, clinics, you name it. All those places where we need to be there.
Rotary has put up several permanent transit posts at all the borders, even guarding the borders between Afghanistan and Pakistan and from province to province. Last year, independent reports said that 3 million children were vaccinated.
This is a place where we have 2-3 shifts, 24 hours in some area. We have all kind of resources inside, the IDs, the jacket, all things that they might need.
बल देता मुदा 0 डोज चिकु टिके लगी आता सोचा वाली दी आता सुकु में लगे वाला ही शापुर वाला ही ठीक से जी थैंक आगे बचो
जो IDPs हैं हम उनको कंट्रोल करते हैं और तिरा खैबर एजेंसी जो IDPs हैं वज़ीरिस्तान के हम उनको कंट्रोल करते हैं हम वहाँ वैक्सीनेशन उनकी करते हैं जो डिस्टर्ब लोग हैं उनको ख़ास हम ध्यान देते हैं बनू में IDPs है बनू के लोगों को तिरा के लोगों को जो वैक्सीनेट नहीं हुए होते हम उनको यहाँ वैक्सीनेट कर देते हैं कि हमारे पास ये ऐसा पॉइंट है जो खैबर से लेके कराची तक सारी व्हीकल इसी से ही गुजरती हैं थैंक यू
We are running not on office mode, but on operation mode. We go in the morning not to work, but to fight. That's the machine that we have now. Hundreds of people are fighting a virus. And there is this commitment.
ये है कि हर मुहिम में 2 कतरे हर बच्चा हर बार लाजमी है ठीक है बहुत शुक्रिया आपका थैंक यू वेरी मच बहुत शुक्रिया थैंक यू सर
It has been a challenge to us, to our frontline vaccinators. And it is so simple. Giving 2 OPV drops. The generations are not going to forget us. We have to complete our work. We want them to walk with pride.
Hello, I'm Isabelle Fontana. You may know me from the world of fashion, but I'm also a polio ambassador for Rotary International.
I have decided to participate in this campaign because I am a mother and I'm very conscious about our future.
नाम क्या है? What is your name? Isabelle. अपना नाम बताओ. She's training with the song.
So I vaccinated a lot of children, and that for me was I felt it was the most important experience of my life, actually.
We're this close to making history. This close to changing the world.
Welcome back to my Rotary Show, doing good and having fun. We're going to go to the last segment, but before we do, I wanted to remind all of you to make sure that you register for the Rotary Foundation Dinner, which is taking place at the Spartan Manor a week from Thursday. Rotary International Vice President Ann Matthews, as well as past director, will be in attendance. She'll be our guest speaker. So it's an important event for you to attend, and it certainly is an opportunity for us to celebrate the giving that we did last year during our Rotary year. So we'll take a look at the last segment. I wish you all the best, and we will have Sandra and Mike Fitzgerald on next week's show, where they've actually coming back from an actual National Immunization Day in Africa. We'll see you next week.
It's hard not to be moved by such amazing work happening in the field every day. And let's not forget other unsung heroes like the dedicated scientists working here at the CDC. You may have heard of the CDC because of the work they do to protect people's health and their work with polio. But that work also has captured the popular imagination and is portrayed in several movies and shows like the hugely popular Walking Dead.
You know what this place is? We protected the public from very nasty stuff. Weaponized smallpox, Ebola strains that can wipe out half the country. Stuff you don't want getting out, ever.
I suspect that scientist would not do well at his next job review with Dr. Frieden, but that's just my take. But in that scene, you see a fictional scientist talking about protecting the world from smallpox and deadly Ebola strains. CDC is one of the 2 facilities in the world that houses smallpox samples, the first human disease to be completely eradicated. Tonight, we're talking about the disease which we hope will become the second disease to be wiped off the face of the earth, polio. One day in the future, CDC may also be a final safe home to the polio virus, consigned forever to the laboratory. But for many people, polio is still an invisible disease with invisible victims. To help us separate the fact from the fiction, let's go behind the scenes at the CDC's Emergency Operations Center to find out why polio is a disease that you may not hear about much, but is still a major target here at the CDC, the Nerve Center for Global Public Health.
I'm Maren McKenna. I'm a journalist. I write about infectious diseases. And for a long time, I have been fascinated by polio. I'm sitting in the Emergency Operations Center, the war room of the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta. And in this year, 2016, this war room has kept track of only 3 diseases: Zika, Ebola, and polio. Now, you might expect Zika and Ebola because those are headline-making international outbreaks, but polio might surprise you. I began writing about polio in 1999, and in that time, a lot of other outbreaks have come and gone from the public's attention. H5N1 flu, SARS, H1N1 flu. For a lot of people, polio has remained consistently under the radar. And that's partly because it's now mostly a disease of developing countries, far from the consciousness of most Americans. But it's also because it's been such a long time since an American had the disease. Think about this. The polio vaccine came to market in 1955. So the youngest Americans who caught polio just before the vaccine arrived are well into their 60s now. And they grew up as part of the March of Dimes generation, always pressed to excel, to be at least as good, if not better, than those who were fully able, even if they were dealing with an arm or a leg that didn't work or a spine that wouldn't straighten. The same year that I started writing about polio, in 1999, I went to India for the first time. The World Health Organization hoped to eliminate polio in the wild by the year 2000, and I wanted to see what it was that they faced. I didn't expect the emotional impact of seeing polio everywhere, at every stoplight, on every street, in every village. There were people living without the use of their arms or their legs or unable to stand. At the time, there were 35,000 new cases a year of polio and 20 million people worldwide living with polio paralysis. It's 17 years now since I took that first trip to India, and the numbers worldwide are so much better. India itself has gone 5 years without a new case of polio, and there are only 3 polio-endemic countries remaining in the world. Yet, for most people, polio remains an invisible illness. But it isn't for me, and it hasn't been since I took that trip to India all those years ago. I've never forgotten a girl I met on that first trip in a small village in Uttar Pradesh. I was sitting in the hut of a headman of the village, learning about an eradication campaign that was taking place soon. And in the back of the hut, 2 girls appeared. One was about 10, one was about 6. And the 10-year-old was carrying the 6-year-old, cradling her like a baby. That was because polio had taken the use of her legs. Her sister carried her everywhere she could. But they told me soon she would not anymore, because in a few years, the older girl would be married and be forced to leave the younger one behind. I asked what would happen to her after that. They shrugged. I have never forgotten that girl. She represents for me all of polio's invisible victims. I write about polio in the hope that eradication will be achieved, and there will never again be children deprived of a future in the way that she was.
We've forgotten how afraid we were. In 1952, the threat was real. Parents were advised to keep children away from crowds. Pools closed, and movie theaters went dark. Hysteria grew. People were quarantined. It was the worst polio outbreak the United States had ever seen. But it's not ancient history. It's still circulating. As recently as 1988, the World Health Organization estimates that the world saw more than 350,000 new polio cases that year alone. That's nearly 1,000 new cases per day. But through the largest global health initiative in history, we've gone from 350,000 cases annually to just 74 in all of 2015. That's a staggering 99.9% reduction. But we can't quit now. If we don't stop circulation of the virus, we risk reinfection and outbreaks. That's why getting to zero matters. We're not saying it'll be easy. Vaccination in these countries is complex and expensive. In our ultra-connected world, the disease is never more than a plane ride away. Within 10 years, failure to eradicate polio from these last remaining strongholds could result in as many as 200,000 new cases every year. We've immunized 2.5 billion children in the world's largest, most sophisticated global health initiative. Our commitment to eradication matters now more than ever. We are on the cusp of making history.
Building awareness is so important for this cause, and social media is such a great way to let people know what you care about. We can see people from around the world using the hashtag #EndPolio to share why they care about ending polio and what they're doing to support the cause. Let's take a look at some of the things people are saying across Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter right now. Wow, it's pretty incredible to see so many governments, organizations, and community leaders getting involved to help us make history. We can see Rotary and the CDC's partner organizations raising awareness and reaching out to their audiences too. It's really uplifting to see people engage with the cause in their own ways. Another record-breaking event is being planned for this Saturday at the National Stadium in Lagos, Nigeria. There, 4,500 people will form the world's largest ever human mosaic. Can't even imagine. All to promote the cause of polio eradication. There are several other events happening in Nigeria too for Rotary's End Polio Now campaign. In Port Harcourt, there's a massive roadshow, a polio walk, an immunization drive, and a para-soccer tournament. See photos and more by following End Polio Now on Facebook and at End Polio Now on Twitter and the hashtag End Polio on Instagram. But the fight doesn't stop this evening. You can continue the conversation by sharing your reasons for wanting to end polio on social media using the hashtag End Polio. To learn about more ways to get involved, go to endpolio.org, where you'll find images, messages, and more shareable content to download. And be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It's so easy. Now, survivors around the world are helping to get the message out, so let's take a look.
I have all kinds of nicknames. One of my nicknames I remember is, they call it Impossible, because I do things that people think is impossible. My name is Dennis Ogbe. I grew up in the northern part of Nigeria, and while I was 3 years old, I contracted polio. And due to polio, I could not use both limbs because I was paralyzed from my waist downwards. But my father, with his 7th grade education, he knew that education was going to be my saving grace. And while I was in school, I took advantage of course, my studies, and I went into sports, and it was really, really tough. I competed locally, I won. State-wise, I won. National, I won. This is a disease that is preventable by a vaccine. So if we can make these vaccines available, it's going to go a long, long way to help a lot of kids. And how my parents suffered and my family to where I am now, I don't think I want any parent to suffer that. Just imagine you being the only kid with a disability in your home, everybody looking on you. I remember those nights that I cry, my mother cries. Before you know, my dad is joining, and my other siblings. It's really tough. So I don't really want any family to go through that. I think what I have now is myself, is my voice. So by people hearing this, they can buy into it as, hey, there are a lot of people like Dennis out there. Let's help.
Before I became a mother, I was a teacher, and my students, they too, were my kids. I've always firmly believed that all children have the right to survive, thrive, and fulfill their potential. That's why I worked with UNICEF in Latin America, taught reading in an inner-city public school, and wrote a book about one teenager who, despite struggles against poverty and disease, was living with hope. Her story, my students' stories, are what drive me now. Once I became a mom to my precious Mila and Poppy, my whole world changed. I finally understood what the mothers I have met have taught me. It's that all moms want the same things, the chance for their kids to live happy, healthy, and productive lives. I am a mom, I am a teacher, I'm an author, I'm a news correspondent, I'm an activist. And I'm excited to announce that I'm the newest ambassador for the U.S. Fund for UNICEF and Rotary's campaign to end polio. Polio is personal to me because of my dear father-in-law, John Hager, is one of the 20 million survivors living with the effects of the disease today. He has been a polio survivor for over 40 years. and he was ultimately paralyzed, living the last 4 decades in a wheelchair. He, like many who face unbearable obstacles, has conquered polio with such vigor, such strength. After his diagnosis, he completed over 20 wheelchair marathons, went on to become vice president of his company, the first lieutenant governor in a wheelchair, and have his second son, my husband Henry. All things many people doubted he could do. He didn't listen to the doubters. He lived. With that said, we agree. No one should live with this disease. No one. There is no cure for polio, but there's a vaccine to prevent it. By vaccinating all children under 5, especially the world's most vulnerable children, we can eradicate polio forever and deliver one of the greatest public health achievements in history.
It's an honor to have the daughter of a former U.S. president join the fight to end polio now. The U.S. is the largest national donor to polio eradication, with just over $2.6 billion committed to the effort. Here at the CDC, the work of dedicated scientists is helping thousands of workers and volunteers bring us ever closer to the reality of a polio-free world. Now, before we close our program tonight, it's time for one last champion of the cause, Rotary's president, John Germ, to tell us exactly what a polio-free world will mean.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey. First of all, I'd like to thank the CDC for co-hosting this event and thank all of our special guests and give thanks to all our partners in the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. For our viewers watching at home, it's easy for you to play your part. Visit endpolio.org and please donate to make sure we save all the children and they have access to those vital vaccinations. Thanks to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, every dollar Rotary raises will be tripled so that we can maximize our efforts to end polio now. I'm personally deeply committed to this cause. My own father was struck by polio as an adult. Doctors said he'd never stand up again, but my father had other ideas. So he did exercises, just as like Dennis Ogbay did. He had my mother tie an old-fashioned pressing iron to his leg, and he's lay in bed, and he lifted it, little by little, until he could walk again. He walked with a limp after that, but he walked. Now, I'm not going to give up easily either. Would you? Which is why I'm determined that we will keep up our efforts to eradicate polio until the job is done. We started this more than 30 years ago. We've stuck with it for over 30 years, all this time. And soon, with your help, we're going to finish it. When we do, all of us will have made good on a promise we made 30 years ago. A promise to leave our children, and their children a gift of a polio-free world.
We are this close.
This close.
To direct more deaths.
We are this close. This close to making history.
This close.
We're this close. We are this close.
We are this close.
This close.
This close to changing the world.
We are this close to making sure no child suffers a crippling disease ever again.
We are this close to making history.
We are this close to ending polio.
This close to ending polio.
We're this close.
This close.
This close to ending polio.
This close.
We are this close to ending polio. All we need is you.
All we need is you.
All we need is you. Is you.
All we need is you.
This close. If we don't act now, we may lose this chance forever. Help Rotary.